Hey guys, what's going on? Arctic Earth Sign, or Polar Bear Michael, as you like to call me, PBM Michael, Mikey Bones, whatever you want to say. It's me again, I'm back, and here we are going to be continuing our support guide series. In this video, I will be covering just item builds in general. If you are interested in relics or starter items, we covered those separately, and I will put a link in the description to those. For this, we are going through just basic items, and I want to take a second to kind of talk about how the video is formatted and how, the guide is generally kind of constructed. There's a lot to talk about with any role this in depth, and I'm, of course, as a professional support player myself, I have a lot of expertise, a lot of experience. I've been doing this, 9 years, 8 years, whatever it's been, at a very high level. So I want to make sure that I'm not kind of cheaping out on the information. So, the relic video is very long. This is also going to be a very long video. So I want to take some time now to explain how we're going to cut it up. So for starters, there will be timestamps to each section. We'll cover neutral items, so items that can be built by magical or physical, and then we will cover magical items and then physical items, and within the magical and physical, we will cover Bruiser items and then pure, damage, pure offense items. And then I will also, at the end of the video, I will talk about glyphs. The reason I don't want to do glyphs in the middle of everything else is because glyphs are kind of on their own scale. You have to weigh how good the base item is versus how good the glyph is, and I think it is just a lot more digestible and a lot more clear if I were to do those in a bit of a separate section. So we're just going to be going through base items at the start of this and get you guys into the swing of things, and I think you'll kind of see what I mean. Really, as I was setting this up, there's so many items to consider. It's no wonder that I get questions all the time about, oh, what do I build on this character? What's strong? How do I do it with this type of god? Or, when my teammates are playing this type of stuff, or when the enemy team has this, or how do I counter build? How do I build for myself? Like, there's so many questions. There's so much to cover here. Honestly, even looking at these items, a couple things myself, I'm like, wait, should I be building that? Like, am I wrong? Like, am I in noob? Am I not playing the game as well as I could be? So there's so much. It's going to be a lot. It's going to take a while. It might be best to split this up with how you guys watch it, but I'm going to try to make it as digestible, as clear, as thorough, as informative, and as helpful as I possibly can. Please remember to comment on this. Tell me if there's anything I missed. I believe for one item, Stone Cutting Sword was actually not put on the tier list that I'm using. The tier list should be up to date on 9.9 except for that one item. So Golden Blade will equal Stone Cutting Sword. I'll put that, kind of highlight that as we're going through it anyways. And then I think that's just about it. Yeah, comment, let me know if I missed anything. If you have any other questions, I will do my best to look through them. But other than that, let's get into it. We have S, A, B, C, D, pretty standard tier list type of stuff. But big pink boxes, items being considered, and we have a whole lot of them to go through. As I said, we split it up in that way. Our neutral items are, kind of first, and then it's magical Bruiser items, then it's magical, damage items, etc. And we'll just try to go through it that way. There's a whole list of items down here. I'm not going to go through every single one. These items I'm not considering. A lot of these are starter items or glyphs, which, starter items, separate part of this guide series, and the glyphs, as I mentioned, we will go through in a later portion of this video towards the end. The rest of it I would classify as troll items. Typhon's Fang, not a good support item. Warlock Staff, Book of Thoth, Transcendence, anything requiring you. Devourer's Gauntlet, anything requiring you to get last hits, just not the way the role plays. Crit, also a very good example. Well, what if I'm playing a hunter support and I really want the Poison Star Deathbringer glyph and Venom Deathbringer or whatever? Crit is the worst possible stat you can build on support. We covered it in earlier parts of the series. Bang for your buck. That's the motto of support. As much as you can get out of the resources that you have. You typically have the least amount of resources on everyone on the map. So crit being the most expensive stat in the game, you don't want to build that. Let's go back up here and let's kick it off with the classic, just an absolute classic, a mainstay, Sovereignty. Been around from the beginning, or at least since I've been playing, at least. Sovereignty, to me, support specifically, okay? So I don't care about any other roles. I don't care about the flexibility of these items. I don't care about if junglers can build them, solo laners, if it can be a solo mage defense item, like a breastplate or something. Don't care. Support only. Sovereignty, A tier item. Strong A tier item. For me, Sov is just kind of doing everything you want. It is a very good physical defense item for yourself. It's very good for your team. The HP 5 is great. It's great to rush. It's very good late game, though not as strong as it is early game, because flat protections get better before people have percent pen, and people have a lot more percent pen as the game goes on. So pretty simple there. To me, Sovereignty is not the greatest in comparison to other things you can be building, because hybrid defense items that offer you both magical and physical defense, cloaks, Thebes, Mana Core Spike, Mail of Renewal, that type of stuff. It'll be reflected in the video later, but they just tend to be stronger, so that's why it's A. Midgardian Mail, attack speed slowing effect. We're going to put this in C tier for now. And also, guys, I will be ordering this tier list left to right. So it's top greater than bottom, left greater than right. I forgot to mention that at the start as well. My bad. But anyways, that should be the last thing that I forget. My gosh. Goodness. Golly. Okay. Anyways. Mystical Mail, D tier. Midgardian Mail, C, because attack speed slowing effects are generally okay, but they are pretty limited into the amount of characters that they can impact. Also requires you to take a lot of damage, and as a support, you're normally not as much of a damage soaker as your Soul Laner is. There's generally just better ways that you can play the game than do that. To kind of offer that anti-attack speed effect, something like a Horrific Emblem would be much more effective, right? It'll reduce their attack speed and they're slowed by more, and it also decreases their damage output, and those effects can apply to more than just the auto attackers, and it doesn't require you to take as much damage. So Midgardian Mail, just an outdated item. Same thing with Mystical Mail. If you want to do damage, just way better ways to do it, way more stat efficient, just not great. Emperor's Armor, I'm actually also going to be I'll put it in B tier, actually. Kind of funny to just have the items in different tiers entirely. Emperor's Armor, I think, will end up towards the bottom of B tier. It's fine for sieging, but again, there's better ways, in my opinion, to approach sieging. If your comp is exceptionally bad on the offensive sieging side of things, then it can be fine to buy. It's a very cheap item, very well statted. So from my head, it doesn't really cost you that much to buy, but it's not really something that we plan to make a core item in our builds. And typically your gold is going to be spent on your first couple core items, and then it will transition into starter upgrades, and you'll have your relic upgrades in there as well. So typically I'm not thinking about Emperor's Armor until really like my fourth full item, and at that point normally sieging is not really as difficult as it would have been earlier. On the defensive side of things, it can be okay, but there's also a lot of healing options in the game. Basically, the better healing gets, the worse an effect like Emperor's Armor is, right? When healing is good both offensively and defensively, you're not really worried about the poke you're taking on those structure fights as much, because the healers can take care of it rather than you wasting an item slot and 2,000 gold on it. Moving on to the magical neutral items. Heartward. Heartward to me is a top B tier item. I don't actually rate it as highly as I rate Sovereignty. The main reason for that is I find the MP5 aura is a little bit less effective than the HP5. You can get MP5 a lot of different ways in the game right now, especially since MP5 will also be on carry items. So, Transcendence, a lot of mage items will have mana or MP5. And because of that, they're not really missing out on that. The mana is fairly irrelevant when you build this item, whereas HP5 on Sovereignty, your damage dealers aren't building HP5 anywhere else, so that's a unique stat that you were giving them. Not to mention that, I just feel like the Sovereignty aura, it does more on the map, because most structures, most objectives deal physical damage, so because of that, you're getting a little bit more value from the PvE and PvP elements of Conquest. I put Heartward just below Sovereignty, still very, very strong, a high B tier option. Pestilence, I guess this starts my whole rant on anti-heal. Anti-heal is not really your job. And when it is your job, this isn't the item you want. When anti-heal is your job, you should be building Cursed when it applies to their team. Cursed is one of, if not the best relics in the entire game, in my opinion. You can hear more about that again in the relic part of this guide. That is a separate video. I am going to put Pestilence as a low C tier item. The stats on it are pretty decent, but it has been power crept. I think there are other items that are more effective than it. And I also just think that the actual effect, 20-25% anti-heal, that's not really doing it for me, if I'm needing to deal with healers, I'm buying Ankh, or I'm buying like a Divine Ruin or a Brawlers or something like that, and I'm applying a lot of it. This constant effect, again, not really something I'm looking for. It doesn't affect out of combat healing really effectively at all. Requires you to be very close, almost to the point where you're diving the enemy a lot of the time, or it needs their divers to be having a lot of healing. Again, generally your carries are going to have a Divine Rune, something like that. It's just not a great item, in my opinion. Bulwark, I actually think is underrated. I'm going to put Bulwark right in between Emperor's Armor and Heartward. Bulwark is a very, very good late game luxury tank item if you are really just getting absolutely pounded and you need something to help you get tankier. This is one of the best items you can get. Percentage of your max health in a shield just gets better and better as the game goes on. So if you are, say, the only frontline tank player, tank character in your team comp, and you really just need to be a meat shield, this might be an item that you want to look towards. Talisman of Energy, to me, I'm going to put as a high C tier item for now. To me, Talisman of Energy, again, a lot of these items are, to me, kind of too situational. I don't like items where there's a chance that it will have no effect on the outcome of a team fight. It'll have no effect from the passive. Again, supports a role where you're looking for bang for your buck, so the amount of efficiency you get from a relic, a starter item, the passives of your item, that's what I'm really looking at. A passive like Talisman of Energy really is only going to be coming into play in the early game, like laning phases when you're splitting waves, but this is not even close to one of the best items that you can go first, in my opinion. If that were the case, I would put this item a lot higher, but again, when you compare it to something like an Emperor's Armor, I'd rather have the Emperor's Armor on sieges than I would Talisman of Energy. And even then, the Talisman of Energy, in my opinion, is just kind of a worse effect than something like a Shogun's, where it has a persistent effect. It's better on objective fights like Fire Giant, and it's just, not conditional. It's just a huge deal. Gauntlet of Thebes. It's up there, guys. It's up there, but how up there is it? I'll put it in S tier. I'll have Gauntlet of Thebes be our first S tier item. I don't think it's the best item for supports. I think it is a very core staple item. It is one that you should consider almost every game. To me, I think it's been drowned out a little bit by other options being so strong in your first item slot that you don't really need to go Gauntlet of Thebes as much, but I mean, there's really not much more to say about the item. It has the most efficient, the most insane defense stats when fully stacked. There's nothing that comes close to it. 60 of each protections for yourself, 10 of each protections in an aura compared to the 15 individually by Sav and Heartward. It's doing both of those items' job by itself, and it's giving you, 250 HP, and it's giving you HP 5. It's just a very, very, very good item. It has been nerfed a couple times over, I think this year, maybe a couple nerfs at the end of last year as well. So it is not as great as it used to be. It is not as core, as mandatory as it used to be, but it's still a very, very good item. Mail of Renewal, that's the big daddy item right there. That item, I would consider this one of the best items in the game for tanks currently. The reason why is because of how incredibly impactful it is right off the bat. So first of all, as I mentioned, healing, very, very powerful in the game right now. There's a lot of options for healing and a lot of ways to take advantage of healing in a meta that I would say is fairly tank heavy right now. I'd say tanks are the best roles in the game currently as of this patch 9.9. So having an item that is giving you a lot of healing and a lot of personal stats. It's giving you, is it 60 of each protections when you fully have the stacks from being hit with Mail Renewal? It's something like that. Ton of each protections. I think it's between 50 and 60, somewhere in there. Also a lot of HP, also HP 5. Great to have as your first item. And the healing effect on it, helping yourself and your teammates, makes it very hard for people to kill you. Let's say you're against like a Fenrir or a Daji. Well, why would I want to go beads when I can just build Mail of Renewal first, and if they want to engage on me, I'm just going to get a huge burst heal that is probably going to save my life, and it helps it apply to my teammates and have them be able to fight harder off of them using so much on me. Great item. The effect does not get procced by things like Curse Donk, so Curse Donk won't increase the amount of damage you take once your Mail of Renewal proc goes off. It will reduce the healing, but it's still very, very strong. In my opinion, one of, if not the best early game first items that you can go as a support player right now. Stone of Gaia, quite the opposite in a weird way. So Stone of Gaia, again, I think kind of, it does all the things I just mentioned with the HP 5 and the healing. The downside to it is that it's only health, and health is a really, really easy stat for supports to get. It's on all of your starter items, it's on all of your starter upgrades, it comes from, all of these other items that you're going to be building. You don't want to build more and more into the items that are going to counter you as a tank. Soul Reaver, Kin Size, those sort of effects are what is really going to end up getting you killed in the mid to late game. building an item like Stone of Gaia, in my opinion, is just not strong enough as a power spike, and it inevitably just kind of gets demolished as the game continues. The only reason I'm even putting it ahead of something like a Mystical Mail is because there can be very rare situations where it could counter an enemy team comp. So let's say they have nobody on their team who's going to build any anti-heal, and they have a ton of knockups, and you just feel like you might die. Maybe it makes you tankier than something like a Bulwark, but I think that the chances are really slim. I'd stay away from the item. Shield of Regrowth is honestly more of a damage option now than it used to be. It has all the same issues as Stone of Gaia with being so health heavy. Generally, we're favoring procs over health currently in the meta right now. And with it being so health heavy, as a pure defense item, it's really not great. The advantages to Regrowth is that it does have a lot of sustain stats on it. It is very nice for that. The movement speed proc itself can be very, very nice. A character like Hercules, for example, where people are going to be constantly playing and dancing within the range of your I think, what's that, Earthbreaker, to try to play around your combo. An item like Regrowth completely changes how that character plays, right? It gives you that burst of movement speed to where they can't really match your gap close or the way you can move around those like kind of weird engagements. So it has its niches where on certain characters it's very, very strong, but generally as an item, I would say it's fairly weak. Also, the power effect on it is not really something you care about a lot. If in an imaginary world you proc your Regrowth effect and it gave you protections instead of giving you power, I would probably say that this is actually a very, very, very good item in the meta right now, but I don't really value the power on it that much, especially a situational power proc, and as a defense item, it's not very good. I'm going to put it just ahead of Talisman of Energy. If this was a fun tier list, this thing is super up there. But just in terms of viability, I'd say high C tier. Breastplate of Valor, moving on to the neutral high fizz prot low health tree. Breastplate of Valor is probably the most valuable of these items, just given that it has a glyph. But not talking about the glyph version of it, I would say the item is actually fairly weak. It was a lot stronger earlier in the year for a couple different reasons, but right now on patch 9.9, I would say it's probably right around here as a C tier item. To me, there's not a whole lot of reason to be building this item. If you want a very high CDR item, I'd rather have Pridwin, basically 100 out of 100 times. The only advantage to Breastplate that I really felt in the past made it okay in comparison to Pridewin would be that maybe you're a character that's very mana intensive, something like, healers could have this if you're playing like a health support or something like that. But in the way that the game is right now, MP5 is very, very easy to get. All of your starter items also give you a lot of mana sustain, so I don't find myself struggling with mana personally. And I really don't feel like you should if you build some of the better items, stuff like Mana Core Spike, probably one of the best items in the game right now, gives you 20 MP5. You basically can't go after you buy that item. So because of that, I just don't value Breastplate very highly, and I also think there are better glyphs out there. Just the ability to glyph the item makes me want to put it higher. I actually think I will. I'll put it low B tier, maybe even ahead of Emperor's Armor. But it's somewhere right around here. It's not the greatest, but it's really the glyphs that are keeping it relevant more so than anything. Hide of the Nemean as a situational defense item, I kind of see it as a worse version of Bulwark where I'm only building it late game, I'm only building it to counter specific things. The previous strength of Hide of the Nemean line was that it would fully block an auto attack. So you would fully block something like a kin size proc, something like a Hydra's Lament proc, because when the full auto itself is getting absorbed, none of the on-hit effects can actually apply to you. Executioner, kin size, demonic grip, so on and so forth, Telekine's Ring, all of that type of stuff. Now that it's only 60% damage reduction, yes, it's very efficient at reducing auto attack damage, but the stacks have to stack up is the first thing about it. It doesn't stop the one-hit effects, which I think is actually what makes up most of the mitigation from the item. I think I'm just going to put it really low. I think it's very slightly better than Midgardian Mail, but overall, not really that great of an item. Contagion, I need a drink really quick. Contagion to me is much better than Pestilence just purely because of the stats that it offers you. It offers mana and MP5 and health and has very high protections. I think 60 physical protections offer, I believe it's 2,050 gold. So as far as like a stat stick item goes, it really doesn't get much better than Contagion. If you were to compare going Contagion first item to going Mail of Renewal first item, really, if you think about it, the Contagion person you would think is favored. They're spending less gold, They're getting a lot more mana sustain. They're getting very, very efficient gold effective stats, and they're countering your healing. The reality is that just 20% anti-heal, you know, anything that's not 40% from Divine, that's not, you know, 60% from Ankh, it's really just not that effective. Like, it really doesn't counter the healing options. It's not doing anything else for you other than the mana sustain and the downtime of that. It's not offering really much for your teammates either. I think it is an underbought item, but I think it's something that doesn't fit the support role currently right now. Generally, playing meta is stronger than playing counter meta, so playing characters that abuse Mail of Renewal, that abuse Mana Core Spike, that type of thing, is going to get you a lot further than trying to counter it, especially when, in my opinion, the effectiveness of the item just kind of isn't there yet. I'm going to put it as a really, really high C tier item. Genuinely, one of the best stat sticks around. But I just think there's better things you can be building. I'd pretty much only consider it later in my build after I've built my core items, and if I really feel like their healing is an issue, and I already have Ankh. Again, if I need anti-heal, I'm slamming Ankh instantly. Either first or second relic, don't care, I'm just getting it. Spectral armor hasn't really been that relevant recently because the kin size ADC builds have been favorable compared to the crit builds. But when crit is in the meta, it is an item that you will be considering. I think it's only slightly better than Nemean. I'm going to put it right above Regrowth. The reason is it just kind of becomes an item that you have to consider when crit is a thing. As far as the individual stats on the item goes, I actually think it is worse than something like a Contagion. It's really about par. I'm just going to put it here because I think the effect of the anti-crit is actually better than the effect of the anti-heal, even though I prefer this as a stat stick item, the Contagion. So yeah, I think as far as Spectral goes, it's fine. Crit's just not that great right now, and even when it is, it's not an item that feels good to buy. It's an item where it really kind of sacrifices a lot of the other stats that you want. You're not getting crowd control reduction, you're not getting CDR, you're not getting other passive effects that are very, very strong, and as I mentioned earlier, your job as a support really isn't to be the main meat shield. That's more of a job and a role that your soul laner is going to fill. It's an item that does absolutely nothing for the rest of your teammates. It's only there to make you tankier, and in my opinion, it's not even the most effective item at that, because if I am getting slammed by a crit hunter, there's a good chance that something like a Mantle of Discord or something like a Bulwark actually might do a better job of keeping me alive. Even something like a Nemean, if I'm only going to take a few autos from them, the damage mitigation on Nemean is actually higher than the Spectral. There might be a chance that even the Spectral is, or that even the Nemean is worse. So I'm actually going to flip this around again. I'm going to put Contagion here. I think Spectral is a little bit overrated, even when crit is meta. Shogun's Kasari, in my opinion, out of all the hybrid magic defense items, I actually think is the best one. It has been nerfed a lot this season. I believe they nerfed the attack speed aura on it as well as the individual defense that it gives you. But it's just a really, really good item. It's something that helps you play the map a lot better. It's something that can buff your teammates. If there's ever double hunter metas, Shogun's kind of shoots way up in value because you're affecting multiple players on the map. Even your soul lane and your jungler, even if they're playing an ability-based character, having a little bit more attack speed still adds up. It's still a lot of damage in fights, still a lot of objective threat. Again, if you want to compare something that helps you siege, I'd still rather have a Shogun's than an Emperor's Armor. I'd rather do more with the time that I can tank the Phoenix rather than be able to tank the Phoenix longer, because oftentimes what dictates when you're allowed to do on a siege, it's not can I tank the damage from this Phoenix, it's are my carries safe enough to walk up and hit it. That's really what dictates if you're able to siege, if you're able to tank the Phoenix and get it, more so than, oh, I'm tanky enough, I can hit this thing. You know, that's not really what it's about. It's, you know, if their team has mage cooldowns that they're threatening your carries with, they're not going to be able to hit it. So I like making them more effective when they can hit objectives, and Shogun's just an item that's great for that. It's really good as like a second item, or even third item if you do have a double hunter comp and you feel like you're tanky enough. It's definitely really nice. Oni Hunter's Guard, underrated item. I'm actually going to put it right between Breastplate and Emperor's Armor. The crowd control reduction, having 20% crowd control reduction, very, very solid stat. It's very good against heavy burst mages, something like a Poseidon. If they're looking to, you know, do a classic Athena taunt into Poseidon, you know, cracking into you in the early game, Oni's is one of the best items at countering it. You're reducing the duration of their CC chain, you're getting a lot of damage mitigation, you're getting very, very cheap and effective stats to kind of counter that. It can be a really good situational item. Again, I would not consider it a core item. I would not consider an item that you should really fixate on, but it's fine. It's solid. Genji's, I'm going to put right between Heartward and Bork. The only reason I put Genji's here is because it just doesn't really do a lot for your team. There are some characters that do more with it than others, so, you know, every character or every support generally tends to be more ability-based, so you're really playing around your cooldowns a lot. Having more of them can be really effective, but having additional cooldowns on something like Athena, like having your Athena 3 up earlier doesn't really do anything for me. Having my Sobek 3 up earlier can be okay. On a character like Yamoja, having an extra ability earlier, any ability that you want, could be huge. So it really just depends on the character for me when you buy this. I think Heartward will be a more consistent option that also offers glyph options and, you know, can kind of just do something for your teammates at all times. But Genji's can definitely be really solid depending on the situation that you're in. I think can actually shoot up this list a good bit. But generally, I prefer items that, in my opinion, are just better for your team. And I think that'll generally be a better way to go about things. Spirit Robe, one of the best defense items in the game. I actually think... I'm going to put it ahead of Renewal, actually. I'm going to put it ahead of Renewal for kind of a weird reason. So the first item you go in the game is often what sets the pace the most. In my opinion, support is the best role in the game, the most impactful role from minutes like 3 to 12, somewhere around there in the early to mid game. You're very influential on the map. You're very strong. You're very threatening. And you're normally very hard to kill. When you're kind of in that period of time, going something like Mail of Renewal is very good. But I almost always consider Spirit Robe in any build that I go. It can be very good first or even second item. I think second item is a little bit better. Having a bit of health online is better first, in my opinion. But as a second item, it does everything for you. It gives you both types of protections. It gives you cooldown, which, as we discovered, is very valuable on almost every character. The 20% crowd control reduction is absolutely huge. Makes it really hard to CC chain you, and not to mention the effect itself. It's just really good. It does everything. I really think it's one of the best items. It's really good against comps that are very annoying to play against. Characters like Eset, characters like Nox, they really struggle against this type of effect. Yeah, they can CC chain you and they can hit you, but because of the DR changes from earlier this year, that type of stuff isn't as threatening to you, and when you can really punish it with an item like this, it makes you very, very tanky at any stage that you buy it. Really love Spirit Robe. I think it's great right now. Magi's Blessing, I think it is barely below Sav. This item, actually, I'm going to put it as an S tier item. I'm going to even put it ahead of Gauntlet of Thebes. The actual proc on the Magi's itself is, of course, situational, okay? I would consider Thebes, Mail of Renewal, and Spirit Robe to be items that you could build in every single game. I don't feel quite the same about Magi's because something like a Bologna 3, a Bologna Disarm, can make you just waste the proc. But in times when you can play around that effect, even if that gets wasted, they poke it off, it's normally doing something because I think it has the best glyphs in the game. Kind of a spoiler alert for later. The Magi Shelter and Magi's Revenge effects are just very good. I think the item offers you a lot of flexibility because of that. I think it can be an item that I would never build it first, but I think you can build it, you know, second, third, whatever, and it can offer a lot of team utility. And I think because of that, it's a very strong item. The actual stats on it, I would rather have a higher prot and lower health item than have the stat split of Magi's. But because I think a lot of other hybrid items like Mail of Renewal, like Thebes, like Spirit Robe are really strong, I don't really think that I notice that lacking when I put a Magi's in my build. Mantle of Discord, I am afraid, has been power crept. I think that it's been nerfed a little bit. It's just too expensive for a support. Honestly, I'm going to even lower it. I think it's a B tier item. It's really, really good when you can utilize the effect. Having an extra crowd control and all of the other stats that it gives is really nice. But I'm not paying the premium on this item for what it does. The internal cooldown on it is too long, in my opinion, for the support role, and too expensive for the support role. The actual stats, as far as the defense goes, Spirit Robe or something, you know, Spirit Robe is just way better, pretty much always, than the Mantle is. I just don't really think it's that great. I think there's a lot of other better options, and if I want a cooldown item and I want a hybrid defense item, I am never buying Mantle over Spirit Robe. And the situations where I can buy both, I think, are few and far between, because if I'm buying the Spirit Robe first and I'm building any of these other items, and I'm also upgrading my relics and my starter item, I'm normally at the point of the game where I'm either purely counter building or I just am willing to put some damage into my build, something like that. I just don't really think it's that good of an item. Honestly, the more I talk about it, the more I want to put it lower, so I'm going to put it lower. Hide of the Urchin. It's so bad, guys. It's so bad. I'll do it a little bit of a favor. No, I'm actually not going to do a little bit of a favor. There's no situation I would buy this item. I genuinely think it is one of the worst items in the game, one of the worst options for you to go. This item, kind of similar to how I was talking about Mantle and Spirit Robe, I would never build this over Thebes. Ever. Never. It doesn't do anything for my team. The stacks are super unreliable. I'm always going to get Thebes stacked way, way quicker. The shield itself, in my opinion, is pretty negligible because it takes so long to even stack. And if it gets even poked off a little bit, you're not going to have it regenerate fully again before, the next instance of damage comes. Like, it's like a mega budget Kepriot that requires you to get a ton of stacks from your item for it to even apply. You might not even get to that point. It's just bad. It doesn't offer you any other stats between crowd control reduction, CDR, anything like that. Again, no passive that helps your team. It's just worse than Thebes. Even if you wanted the shield, it's worse than Bulwark, And it's not even a cheap item. It's still fairly expensive as far as support items that we want to look to buy are. It's awful. Don't buy it. Pridewin, whatever you want to call it. Very, very, very good item. I'm going to put it just below Sovereignty, but between Shoguns. It's been nerfed a couple times, the damage on it, and the effect itself has been nerfed. But in my opinion, the best 20% CDR tank item in the game for support. It just does a lot of things that you want. It doesn't have... The biggest weakness of Pridewin is that the tier 1 item is really not that great. It's an expensive item that doesn't give you a lot of defense. 10% CDR can be really nice, but if you're not ahead, you could feel a little bit bad building it. The tier 2 and tier 3 of the item are really, really solid. A lot of protections, a lot of utility from the 20% CDR, but it's just okay. You might not always get to apply it. Like, let's say I'm a character like Kepri. Pridewin does really well for me in the scenario that I do want cooldowns on that character, but I might not even have the proc be relevant. I much prefer Pridewin on characters that are kind of hybrid-y. Something like a Terra even, where there's a good chance that I'm near their backline. I might even hit them with all of my damage, all of my procs from the Pridewin, from my alt, whatever. I prefer it on characters like that, where there's like a good chance that I might actually dive their backline if I get the opportunity to. Or of course, just full like kind of dive playstyle characters, stuff like Fenrir, assassin supports, warrior supports, I think do really well with this. It's definitely a really strong item. In years past, I would have put it in S tier for sure. I think it's a little bit weaker than it used to be. Forget the support build guide, okay? This is just the best item in the game. Mana Core Spike straight up is the best item in the game. I genuinely don't even think another item is close. Like, I really don't think another item is close to this thing. It does everything, guys. It's 35 of each protections, 300 health. Like, that is insane, man. That's insane. You're getting more health than Thebes, and you're getting over half the protections that a full stack Thebes gives you right off the bat. And it's cheaper, and it gives you 20 MP5, so you can't go out of mana. I built Mana Core Spike on Guan Yu, I think it was, or something like that. Just some warrior support that spams a lot of cooldowns. I think it was Guan, maybe it was Horus. It was something like that. Anyways, you can't go man. You just can't. It is crazy. Like, it was like a challenge. It was like, that meme where it's like, go out of mana with Mana Core Spike challenge, and in parentheses, impossible, like that meme. Like, it's actually that, but reality. And the damage on it is so insane, man. It is so insane. If you check your damage recap after fights, and you check how much your Mana Core Spike does to people, just a couple procs is like 300 damage. And I'm not talking about late game. I'm talking about like you're level 8, and you just happen to hit their carries with your crowd control and then pick up the spike. Like, it is crazy. This is not only the best support item in the game, not only the best tank item in the game, it is the best item in the game. If you are playing characters right now on patch 9.9, and you are not playing characters that can use Mana Core Spike, you are doing the game, you're playing the game wrong. You're just worse off than you could have been. Insanely broken item. The second best defense item in the game. The only reason this item, in my opinion, is not as talked about as Mana Core Spike is because it is conditional, right? You do have to be a healer to get the full effectiveness of the item. But even if you compare it to an item where that's not the case, if you compare Genji's Guard, and Fey Hoops. They're the same price. Genji's Guard, I believe, is 150 health. Could be wrong on that, but it's something like that. Fey Hoops is 350 health. I believe Genji's is 70 prots. Fey Hoops is 60. Okay, so 200 health for 10 prots. The 200 health is generally better. And it applies to physical characters, right? Because my magic prots don't apply to them, but health does. Makes me tankier to them, right? And it gives you 10% like cooldowns. Same thing as Genji's. And then the proc itself is just crazy on characters that can apply it. Things like Yamoja, Terra, Sylvanas, Guan Yu, Horus, any healer, hell, Aphrodite, any healer support that you might be playing, this item is so crazy. Like, just think of it as a counter to anti-heal on those healers. Like, their anti-heal isn't reducing the effect of your shield. So when you shield them, when you have Fey Hoops and you heal them, and you put a shield on top of your teammates, that is just crazy value, because even when they build something to counter what you're trying to do, you're still able to give them so much effective HP through this item. And it's something that works constantly. It's something that can make it easier to tank towers, can make it easier to tank fire giants, because you can put all of them on the ground. You know, if your teammate doesn't pick up the little flower in the ground, you can go pick it up and use it to tank an objective. It is so versatile in terms of what you can do with it. It is so effective. It is so efficiently statted. Both of these items are just incredibly overtuned. Best tank items in the game by far. Moving on to a Bobble. I would say Bobble is actually really weak. I'm going to put it on the probably right around the Regrowth Talisman of Energy. These items happen to also be for fun items, in my opinion. My main issue with Bobble is very similar to Mantle. I think it's too expensive and the effect of it is not rewarding enough. Going from 40 to 50% CDR is really not that big of a jump. In my opinion, it's very rare that you'll actually get a lot of value out of that. You're talking about maybe a second and a half on your base cooldowns. And when it comes to your ultimate cooldowns, by time you would actually get use out of this item, you're at the stage where you're really only fighting once every 60 seconds, 90 seconds anyways. A little bit of cooldown on your ult won't really matter. It's not going to be the difference between you getting ult twice in a fight or anything like that. Even the best case scenario for a character that can use this is like Yamoja. And I wouldn't really consider it in most of my Yamoja builds. I think other items are just way stronger. Items like Fey Hoops that can improve my healing. Items like Lotus Crown that can improve my healing. I just think Bobble is really not in a great spot right now. It has been buffed recently. So, you know, maybe as the meta develops more and time goes on, maybe my opinion will change about it a little bit. But in my opinion, the risk reward is just not there. The payoff isn't high enough. And I think it's not giving me what I want from the rest of my items. You know, it's not giving me defense, it's not giving me crowd control reduction, it's not doing all those other things for me. And even the effectiveness from the power is mitigated by the downside of the item making me do less damage. So not really a big fan of it. So onto the dagger tree. This is the last of the neutral items that we can build. Wingblade, in my opinion, is a fairly outdated item. I will say that Wingblade is pretty strong against very slow heavy comps, and having crowd control reduction on a cheap item is really, really nice. But in my opinion, just the effects from other items, pretty much anything in A tier and above, is just really, really, really solid. And I think it'll do more on a more consistent basis. Wingblade isn't really helping your team at all. And the stats on it have just been nerfed a good bit. I just am not really a fan of the item. I think that it does fit all of the criteria that I say about, you know, bang for your buck, getting a lot out of your items. Like, it is a very, very cheap stat stick, but similar to, you know, Contagion, I just don't find the effect to really be worth it at all. So for that reason, I have it as a C tier item. For that reason, I'm out. It's a C tier item. It's just, there's better things to build. There's better counter items. You know, if I want to counter crowd control, or I want to counter, you know, slows getting me killed or something like that, like, generally I'm not getting killed because I'm getting chased down forever. Generally I'm being killed by CC chains. Items like Bulwark, Oni Hunter's Garb, Spirit Robe, those are your better go-to options to counter that sort of playstyle. Relic Dagger is my favorite item in the dagger tree. I think, unfortunately, it's really, really hurt by what I had mentioned earlier about prots being so much more valuable than health right now, because you get health from so many sources. Of years old, something like Pridewind plus Relic Dagger used to be like the dream combo. Pridewind gives you a ton of prots. Relic Dagger gives you a ton of health. Together, they give you a ton of CDR. They give you some crowd control reduction. You know, it gave you everything. And relics are so broken right now for supports. It's one of the most important things about the role. surely an item that makes them come up quicker is really valuable. And I think it is. I just think it's really hard to build. I'm going to put it right below Heartward. It's honestly an item, one of the main items when I looked at all of these where I'm like, you know, maybe I should be building that more. Maybe I'm wrong. I do think there are situations where it is very good. It is very strong. I think it is something you should consider as kind of like a luxury item if you feel like you can't die or, you know, that type of thing. But in my opinion, it's in a really weird spot to build because in the past, when Relic Dagger was kind of first introduced, the way I would personally use it is I would want to finish building it right as I'm level 12 and I'm getting my second relic. When I have both of my relics and I can get value out of both of them, and I can get a Relic Dagger, suddenly that mid-game for you speeds up a lot. You're able to force a lot of resources. You're able to use your relics very effectively. Trades like beads, you blinking for their beads, those type of trades get way, way better when you have an item like this. Same thing with something like Horrific, same thing with like an Ankh, or even a Phantom Shell. You know, if you have Relic Dagger and Phantom Shell, you can Phantom Shell every single Yemoja, you know, stuff like that. That is really, really strong. It's kind of this weird window where like in the mid-game I really want it, but I think there's other items that are better. And I'd rather spend 800 gold or 1600 gold to upgrade both of my relics rather than build the Relic Dagger. I'd rather have my relics be as impactful as they possibly can be and put all of my gold into that rather than have the base versions be up a little bit more often. The exception to that would be Blink. Because I think other relics are better than Blink, and I think there's a lot of other places I want to put my gold, Relic Dagger to me falls down a little bit, but it is a really, really strong item. I can't emphasize that enough. When it hits, it really hits, but I think there are better, stronger ways to play the game currently. Witchblade falls into the same category as Midgardian Mail for me. I'm going to actually put it right above Midgardian Mail. I think it is the direct comparison. But to me, when it comes to mitigating damage, especially auto attack damage and attack speed in general, I'd rather just have Horrific and kind of lean on that effect. Witchblade doesn't give me enough stats to really get excited about. I don't care about like the attack speed on it at all, for example. And I just find other items to be better. And if it's for my own personal defense, I don't think it even comes close to any of these other items like Sovereignty, like Spectral, like Nemean, etc. Toxic Blade. We're starting to get into the that's like the first like troll item territory. It gives you a lot of things, but again, stats that you're generally not going to make the most use of. Getting even 3 auto attacks on people is pretty difficult as a support, depending on your character, especially as Guardians. As a warrior and assassin, 3 auto attacks isn't that crazy, but generally this is an item that your soul laner or your jungler should be building, not you. Lotus Crown, really, really good item. I would say probably right around here, maybe along with Pride Wind. I think the lack of, because it is so situational, I'm going to put it lower than Pride Wind, but on characters that are healers that can build them, I would say both Fey Hoops and Lotus Crown should be in your build. If you are something like a Terra, maybe even a Yemoja. I'm not the hugest Lotus Crown Yemoja fan, but I would rather have Lotus Crown, I think, than Gauntlet of Thebes, because the Prot Aura is the exact same, 15 of each, but I'd rather be going these items, these first 4 items here, Manicore Spike, Fey Hoop, Spirit Robe, Mail of Renewal. I would rather go any of these first 4 items early in my build rather than a Gauntlet of Thebes, and when I want the Prot effect for my teammates, then I'll go the Lotus Crown. It's cheaper, and it's just giving me a little bit more flexibility to be stronger in the early game. So that's how I would build healers right now. I would go early game Renewal, Spike, or Spirit Robe. That would be my first item. My second item would be Fey Hoops, and my third item would be Lotus Crown. That's pretty much my exact Terra build. For example, I would go Spikes, Hoops, Lotus Crown. Do that on Terra, do that on Sylvanas, do that on Yemoja, do that on any healer where the items apply. Not Horus. He can't build Lotus Crown. Sorry, bud. Jade Emperor's Crown. I actually think Jade Emperor's Crown, if it was a little bit cheaper, it would be really, really insane. Unfortunately, because it's not, I'm going to put it right below Relic Dagger. I think you could swap these two. Jade Emperor's Crown is actually a really, really well-statted item. In my opinion, the best physical defense item in the game for Guardians. The issue is the price on it. If it was 2,500, 2,400 gold, there might be situations where I would build it over a Spirit Robe. But because it's not, I just think other items are more flexible and can do a lot more for you. Generally, the way I think of Jade Crown is, are my teammates having a difficult time with their warrior, with their jungler? If yes, I try to build a physical defense aura for them in the late game. And generally, of the 3 of Well, I guess Thebes you can't really stack, so I could say 4, but I'm not going to include it. Of the 3 of Lotus Crown, Sovereignty, and Jade Crown, I think Jade Crown's barely third, and the biggest reason for that is because the Sovereignty and Lotus Crown auras are more effective against the proc items, the Mana Core Spike and the Glad Shield from the Soul Laner. Jade Crown is really an item that's only applying to a full damage jungler and a full damage assassin and a full damage hunter to really get value out of the aura. So I just find that's not as flexible, and it's a little bit too expensive for me, but it is a really, really effective item. Celestial Legion Crown, it's in the dumpster. I understand it's an anti-crit item, but it's bad. Don't build it. It is anti-crit that gets absolutely shredded. Proc items like Kin Size, like Crusher, etc. absolutely demolish this item. The stats that it even gives you aren't very effective. There's better damage items, better hybrid damage items. It's a bad item. Tyrannical Plate Helm, it's like the offensive version of Emperor's Armor, where it's still worse than Emperor's Armor, and it also doesn't do other stuff for you, and it's too expensive. It's bad. Also, don't build it. I'll put it ahead of Mystical Mail for the hell of it, I guess. No, I won't. It's bad. Stone of Fall, it actually is maybe an underrated item. As far as defense item goes, it's 40 of each protections. It's solid health. It can be a lot of damage mitigation. The issue is that you can't really control... You can control the damage mitigation. Like, you can kind of treat it as like a Nuwa passive where you use a couple auto attacks to get it to 2 stacks, and then when you use your 3rd auto attack on an enemy, then you will apply the Stone of Foul damage mitigation. It's okay. I think if I want a damage mitigation proc, I'm just going Spirit Robe every time. Way easier to control, way more consistent to get value out of, gives me better stats elsewhere. Stone of Foul is really, really well statted though. I actually think it is somewhat underrated. I'm going to put it between Breastplate and Mantle. It's just hard to build. Like, it's really, really difficult to build, but if it does make sense, it can be really good. You know, there are some characters who weave in some auto attacks as Guardians, as Mages. Something like a Terra, you might be using your auto attacks to slow people, and it could be an okay item. But again, I'm not building this before I'm building any of these other items in S and A tier. And then once I get into the late game, this generally isn't the item I'm looking for. I'd rather have a proc like Bulwark. I'd rather have situational stuff from like Anemia and a Spectral, etc., etc. So stat-wise, really good, but practically not great. Stone of Binding, I think, is kind of outdated just post Time to Kill patch world, post 9.5. The Flat Pen aura is okay, and generally the way Flat Pen works is the more Flat Pen your team has, the more effective having more Flat Pen is. Does that make sense? Like, the more Flat Pen you have, the closer to true damage you get. Mage items did recently get buffed on Flat Pen, so that does help the argument for something like a Stone of Binding. But generally speaking, percent health damage and percent penetration are the stats that your carries are really looking for. And because of that, you're not really Flat Pen stacking, which means you're not really helping them get closer to true damage. So while Stone of Binding is really cheap and has pretty good stats for the price, as an item slot alone, it's not great. And for your own personal damage, it doesn't come anywhere close to an item like Mana Core Spike, even an item like Pythagorean's Piece. It's just not really as good. I'm actually just going to put it as a high C tier item. Again, it sounds like it should be good, kind of similar to Contagion, but I think in practicality it's just not. Voidstone, I think it's actually an underbought item right now. I'm going to put Voidstone right above Heartward. I actually think it is a better item than Heartward. And the main reasons for that is I think it really fits well with an item like Mana Core Spike. I think that kind of combination of item can give you a lot of damage in your build and increase the damage for your teammates quite a bit. I think that Magical Soul Laners are also decently strong, and I think it can help your mage a lot. I think as soon as your mage gets their percent pen online, they become incredibly strong characters. It just takes them a lot of gold to get to that point. And by building this item, you basically can help them get there quicker. And there's a lot of characters where it might help you. Let's say you're Cerberus, a character that can do a lot of damage. Well, if I'm a Cerberus and I have like a Mana Core Spike and I also build like a Voidstone second or third, I'm going to be doing a ton of output myself, and I'm also buffing my teammates. And if you do have a Guardian solo and a Mage, if you're a triple magical comp, in my opinion, this should be in your build somewhere. I would say it's better on a solo laner than it is. Like, it's better on a solo lane Guardian than it is on a support Guardian. And again, I'm not building this over any of these other items, and it has to fit situationally. But just in terms of the stats that it gives you and what it can do, really, really strong in my opinion. Pythagorean's Piece, I think is a better version of Voidstone after I talked about Voidstone for all of that. This is something that does stuff constantly for you. If you can get it into your build, the biggest downside is that it doesn't really give you protections. We've already covered how detrimental that can be. But in combination with something like a Mana Core Spike, in combination with something like a Spirit Robe, it can balance quite well. Pride Wind, for example. And it does a lot for your team. It's kind of like a Shogun's. I'm actually going to put it ahead of Shogun's. It's like a Shogun's effect in terms of helping your DPS and your damage on objectives and structures and all of that. But it also has the added benefit of giving you sustain in those situations, and it's just nice for your own damage. It helps you clear stuff quicker. It just feels good to buy, and it's fairly cheap. It's one of the better, how can I make my team do more damage auras, if not the best one. Ethereal Staff, A tier item. Now, when I say A tier item, it's not because of how often I think you should build it, because I don't think you should. In my opinion, this is like a last item pickup right here. But when you do get it last item, and you do have a lot of protections elsewhere, it's really, really good. Being something like a Yamoja even, a character that can hit the enemy frontline pretty easily from range, if you can just spam proc this thing on their frontline, you will swing the HP between the frontliners by a few hundred, if not even up to like 1,000 potentially. It's just really good with that type of thing. So because of that, I value it a good bit in those scenarios. Moving on to Gem of Isolation, in my opinion, just a worse effect than something like an Ethereal Staff. Well, when I say that, I just mean I'd build it in the same slots, but I don't value the proc as much. The slow percentage and the duration itself are just not strong enough. In my opinion, not really a very good item. In the past, you would see this item on a character like Ares and have it be very effective. It would make your chains almost like a hard CC because of how crazy the slow would get. That's a thing of the past. It's a really weak item. In my opinion, I'm actually going to put it as a low C tier item. I'll put it right above Pestilence because I just don't value Pestilence very highly. But yeah, not very strong. Better stuff to be doing in my opinion. Rod of Asclepius, I think in the meta right now is actually a really interesting situational item. I think it is worse than something like a Pythags at doing a similar effect of increasing sustain. But because Fey Hoops and Lotus Crown are so strong, and Mail of Renewal, and Meditation, there's so many options as a healer in the support role right now that are really effective, and because of that, having a Rod of Asclepius can be really effective for your team. If it had the same sort of stats that Caduceus Shield had, where it had protections rather than just having magical power, I think this might genuinely be one of the best, if not the best items for a support to consider right now. But in current circumstances, I just think because of how expensive it is and because of the actual stats or lack thereof that it gives you, it's a little bit lower for me. I'm going to put Asclepius right between Jade Empress Crown and Genji's Guard. Chronos Pendant, this is the big one. This is the meme item. Guys, I hate to say it, this item's dog shit. Not a bad item, it's bad in support. If I want a 20% CDR item, I'm just going Breastplate or Pride Wind every time. They give me the other stats that I want. It's just better. It's not as expensive. Chronos Pendant is super, super expensive by what you want to do. And people are like, oh, well, it helps you do more damage. Not even close to as much as Mana Core Spike. Not even close. And Mana Core Spike scales way better throughout the game. And they're like, oh, well, Chronos Pendant helps your MP5. Not as much as, well, actually, yeah, as much as Mana Core Spike. But when mana's like a threshold. Like, it's either a problem until it isn't. And when you have even one MP5 item, it isn't. So I don't care. It's bad. Don't build it. It is an absolute bait. And it is one of the worst build trends that has caught on to absolutely plague the support role. Is what it is. Sorry, not sorry. Rod of Tahuti. This is when we get into the full damage items. As a full damage item, E-Staff is going to do more damage for you than a Rod of Tahuti. And the glyph options on Rod of Tahuti, there is one that's actually pretty decent, but I am not spending 3,600 gold as a core thing in my build. I think I'm going to put it as the worst item in the list so far. Spear Magus, all the flat pen options for mages got buffed, so we can consider them a little bit more now. The reality, flat pen is just not that strong right now. And as far as support damage items go, there are better ones. You know, this one, Mana Core Spike. Better ways to do damage as a support than build flat pen options. Though I do still think the flat pen tree is very, very good for Guardians. And Magus is one of the better damage amplification effects that you can buy. I'm going to put it as a low B tier item. Divine Ruin, in my opinion, the best anti-heal item that you can buy as a support other than Curse Donk, but I would always buy Curse Donk. 99 out of 99 times, 100 out of 100, 37 out of 37 times. I'm buying it 100% of the time if I need anti-heal. Divine is secondary, but my mage should have Divine. So it's a really strong item, but you shouldn't have to build it that much. Spear Deso, it's like a for fun item. It's like a win more item. It's just worse than Magus. It's worse than Divine. It's better than Stone and Binding. But this is about where I rate Mage Flatpen. Obsidian Shard is, in my opinion, if I have a high power build, I'd rather have Ob Shard than something like an E-Staff. But I have to be like an Atlas that only has like Gauntlet of Thebes only, and then I'm going literally full damage. And then having Ob Shard on my alt could be pretty cool. Practically, you're not going to really be building it that much, so I'm going to put it pretty low here. I'll put it low C tier, maybe above Pestilence, but somewhere around there. Demonic Grip. You should not be playing characters where this is like an item that you're considering. But as far as like helping your team's damage, it's a pretty strong effect, honestly, if you can realistically stack it. But as we talked about with Stone of Foul, getting auto attacks off as a Guardian, not really that realistic. As a mage support, it could happen a little bit more, but it's really not an item you should be building. Book of the Dead is kind of interesting, where if you do have a lot of items that happen to give you mana, let's say you did go a Breastplate of Valor or something like that, you might actually get decent value out of the shield, but realistically you're not going to, and it's just not that strong. Put it right here. I gotta move Urchin down, guys. It's so bad. It's so bad. Soul Reaver, slightly worse than Ethereal Staff for the effect, just because Ethereal Staff scales off of the enemy health and you having more health is good. Soul Reaver scales off of power, so if you don't have a high power build, you're not really getting the most effectiveness of it. So because that fairly low, still a good damage item. I'd rate it worse than I rate like an Ob Shard, for example, or any of the flat pen options, but it's a really good damage item. I'll actually put it slightly below Chronos Pen. I think it's D tier. Staff of Mirrodin, actually really good. As a pure damage item, I'd say one of the best damage items. I'd put Ethereal Staff and then Staff of Mirrodin. So I guess I would have it more kind of up here. I'd rather have it than Mantle and Stone of Foul as well. Kind of around here is where I would rate it. I'd actually put Magus up here too. I think I did that a little bit dirty. Around here is where I would put the damage items. These would be my top three for sure. Magus, Staff of Mirrodin, E-Staff, not in that order. We're moving on to the physical items. There is just so much of these things, man. Berserker's Shield was okay, got nerfed a lot for jungle and for solo because of that. Doesn't really give me what I want out of the support. It can be an okay combo item, but again, as even a bruiser item, not really that great. I'm going to put it as a C tier item. Comparing it into where these other items fall in, I'd actually rather have it than like a Witchblade, but not very highly. Maybe I'll move it up a little bit more. I'd rather have it than like Wingblade, Bobble, Regrowth, somewhere around here. Somewhere in this kind of spectrum in the mid C tier. Glad Shield, on the other hand, if I'm playing a warrior support, you better believe I'm playing one that can go at least one of Manicore Spike or Fey Hoops, and all of those characters can use Glad Shield, and Glad Shield, really, really great combo with those other items. Let's say I play like a Guan Yu. I actually did this the other day. I played Guan Yu and I went Fey Hoops, and then I went Gladiator Shield. That's a great combo. I'm a character that doesn't use spikes that well, but I abuse Fey Hoops really hard, and I get a lot of damage out of my Gladiator Shield, and I'm going to be building a lot of procs later in the build. It works really well with all the hybrid defense items. Renewal, Spirit Robe, Manicore Spike, Gauntlet of Thieves. Really, really good item. I actually think if there was a magical version of this, I would have it like right next to Manicore Spike. The only reason Glad Shield isn't higher up is because I think Guardians and magical supports are just better than physical supports right now. Really, really nuts item, though. I am going to put it right under Lotus Crown. Again, for characters that can build it. Actually, no. It's more effective than that. It's there. No, actually, it's there. No, actually, no, it's right there. It's a high A tier item, Gladiator Shield, very, very strong. Void Shield, similar to Void Stone. However, the efficiency of the stats on the item for yourself, way worse than Void Stone. And I would only build Void Shield when you're 4 physical. So pretty much you only have a mage in your team comp. I think that's actually more likely than you having 3 magical, because I think generally you'll see warrior, assassin, hunter, and mage, And then really the pivot is on your support character. So if you pick a physical, it's likely you'll be 4 physical. It's a damage amplification item that you should buy in those scenarios, but only late game. It's really expensive and inefficient for what it brings. So because of that, it's a D tier item, but it is something that can fit, just probably not. If I need damage or if I'm playing a physical support, I'm building everything I can in A tier before I'm building Void Shield. Shifter Shield, bad. Just bad. Yeah, not good. Better damage items out there. I'd rather build all of these before it. I'll put it above Book of the Dead just because I think Shifters early can be pretty good. Runic Shield. Jade Crown is only up here because it's percentage power reduction. Runic Shield is flat power reduction, which makes it better early game, worse late game. It's better early game, but it's not better than any of these other early game options I can go. So because of that, bad. Right below Soul Reaver. Kadusha Shield. If physicals had a Lotus Crown that gave a Prot Aura, this item would be so nuts. I'm going to put it as a high or a low A tier item, excuse me. If you do play something like a Horus, I would really, really recommend going Manicore Spike, Fey Hoops, Spirit Robe, Kadusha Shield, Mail of Renewal, some combination of that build on Horus, maybe a Magi's last. Really, really strong on that type of character. Again, Guan Yu, it was my third item in that build. I went Fey Hoops, Gladiator Shield, Kadusha Shield. Really, really great with a lot of the meta options that you have. If you're going Meditation, if you're going Mail of Renewal, you're making those heal for even more. Really, really strong. Ansile, Anchile, whatever you want to call it. Anchile, I don't know how to say it. Don't know what's correct. I do know you shouldn't build it though, so hopefully that's helpful in a build guide. Yeah, just not great. Not a great item. I would say it's worse than Runic Shield. It's better. It's worse than Stone of Gaia. It's better than Mystical Mail. Barely. Blackthorn Hammer, super outdated item. Really bad. This item is brought up every time to me that it gets buffed. It's not good, guys. It's really not good. I don't have an issue with mana as a support player. Like, your starter items give you mana. These other items can give you MP5. Other items do more damage than Blackthorn. Even the cooldown is a stat that's so easy for me to get. I'd way rather have a Pride Win any day of the week. And I think the Pride Win will ultimately lead to you doing more damage. I think Blackthorn's a really, really bad outdated item. Very similar to Runeforge. Runeforge had a little bit here at the start of Season 9 where it was really buffed and it was really strong. We're not quite there right now. I do think it's maybe a little bit underbought. I think it's better than Runic Shield, but it's not great. Sledge. Sledge is like the most comparable item. It's like an offensive Spirit Robe is how I look at it. You'll do more damage, but you'll take more than something like a Spirit Robe. So it's like a Bruiser Warrior option. It can be okay in combination with like, you know, let's say I'm like a Fenrir and I go Manicore Spike, Glad Shield, and Sledge. That's a really good Bruiser build. I just think that because it's not the first item that I would go in that build, it kind of it tends to be less effective later on. And I'd rather have other items by that point. Like, I'd rather have a Pride Win on a Fenrir, on a Serket, something like that. The item in isolation is really good, but in terms of the order you would build it becomes a lot less effective. So I don't really value it as highly. I'm going to put it right above Stone of Binding. High C tier item, but not great. Frostbound Hammer, kind of a meme. I view it as like the physical equivalent of Gem of Isolation, but warriors and assassin supports will auto attack, or hunter supports will auto attack more than the mage or guardian will be able to get their abilities off. It adds utility to something that previously wouldn't have, so that makes it really strong. So it's better than Gem, and it's a better slowing effect than Midgardian, but it's really not something that you should be building. I'd build it in the same scenarios as E-Staff, and even then, I'd rather just go a full damage or a full defense item. These hybrid items in the Mace Tree, other than Sludge, are really just not great, in my opinion. Executioner is like Demonic, but it's way better because the heavy Exeglyph can be really good on supports that you would build this on. And as a lone damage item, if you don't have a glyph, Heavy Executioner is like Void Shield on steroids for your team. And it's cheap. The glyph itself, plus the item, only costs 2,800 gold. It's still cheaper than a mantle at that point, you know? It can be really, really, really good. Helps your team do a lot of objectives. If you are playing a physical support and you're going a full damage item, this should be the one, in my opinion. I'm going to put this item, surprisingly to many of you, I'm sure, really freaking high. I'm going to put it, honestly, higher? No, right there. I'm going to put it right there. just because the glyph is so good. If I'm playing a physical support, that's the damage item, the pure damage item I want. I'm still building Mana Core Spike, I'm still building Glad Shield, but if I'm building a pure damage item, it's that one right there. The other one I would build is this one right here, and it's in the bottom of B tier, only because I think this is more of like a hunter support item, realistically, that you'll get a lot of value out of. If I'm playing something like a Fenrir, an Amaterasu, something like that, I'd rather have the heavy XE than the Kins. You'll do more personal DPS with the Kins, but I think the heavy XE is a lot better for your team, so I'd rather that. I'm actually going to move Sludge up a tier as well, by the way. I think it should belong here. What else are we missing? Brawlers. Okay, so for Brawlers, it's kind of like Divine, but also not really. Again, your jungler should have it. Your hunter could have anti-heal. You'd rather just have a curse donk. If you're a diver, you'll do more damage with something else. It's fine. I'll put it right below Sludge. Jotuns, actually pretty good. These are like the Mace Tree physical items. If I'm playing a physical support, to me, more often than not, that means damage playstyle. Guardians and mages tend to have more utility than warriors and assassins. So if I'm playing a warrior assassin, I want the damage from them. And if that's the case, I don't mind having the CDR. I view it as like a breastplate on those type of characters where, you know, I compare it directly to Pridewind, but because it's damaged, it's kind of nice. Comparing it to Chronos Pendant, it's way cheaper, and Flat Pen is a much, much better stat to have in the early game. So it's actually pretty solid. I'm going to put it high C tier, maybe just below, no, above Deso. I think it's above Deso. It's really, really good. Crusher, if the attack speed was higher, I would consider it more towards this like Brawlers, Jotuns kind of level. But the attack speed on it's really low, so because of that, I think it's just pretty bad. I'm going to put it below Runeforged. And same thing with Titan's Bane. If I want % pen, I'm building Executioner all day as support. Even if I don't glyph it, I'm still building the Executioner over the Titan's Bane. The reason Obshard is okay is because Guardians have really crazy ult, stuff like Terra ult, stuff like Atlas ult can do a lot of damage. Warrior support's not really quite the same thing. You're more base ability damage. Something like a Herc Boulder could do a lot of damage to Titan's Bane, but generally you're better off building proc items, Mana Core Spike, Glad Shield, Pridewind, that sort of thing. So I'd still rather even have the heavy XE on something like a Hercules than Titan's Bane, so pretty low priority for me. I'm going to put it above Ansile, but it's really not great. Heartseeker is like the situation I would want to build for Titan's Bane, same situation, but if I had a ton of gold, it is more effective but less practical. So I'll actually put it ahead of Crusher. It's a better version of Crusher for what I want to do. Soul Eater is like the Chronos Pendant of physical supports. It seems like it should be really good, but if I want healing, I'm not building over Mail of Renewal. I'm not building it over any of these other healing auras. Just, it's barely even on this list, to be honest. A lot of these are just kind of irrelevant. So, yeah, it's just low. It's not great. Put it above Blackthorn at least, maybe. Right there. Ichval, kind of same thing. It's a decent utility item, but generally when you build this, I do like this item more than Stone Cutting. Again, Golden Blade is Stone Cutting for the sake of this video, because Stone Cutting, I didn't see the picture here. It's a little bit better, but it's not really the job of the support. You know, a lot of these physicals, it's so hard to value because I just think Magical Gods are way better. Really, it's just whatever. It is a decent damage item. I'd rather have Flat Pen from other items, and if I'm building an auto attack item, I'm building XC and I'm building Kins before I'm building Ichval. Going 3 auto attack based items, not really that realistic. You're basically not a support at that point. Pretty low for me. Probably below Demonic Grip. Stone Cutting Sword, I'm going to put it here just to prove a point. This is Stone Cutting again. Stone Cutting is trash right now. Bad item. Like, the amount of prots that it gives you and the amount of prot shred it has less prot shred than any of these other mace items. I'd rather have Crusher over Stone Cutting every day of the week. It's not good. Erendite and Failnaught are here just to round out the Arthurian items. Erendite can be okay on some physical supports as a gap close, but again, it's just a pure damage item. It doesn't really fit what you want to do. I'll put it like right below Radha's Hootie. And then again, Failnaught, if you are playing a Hunter support, Failnaught, Executioner, Kin Size, maybe you should actually have those in your build. It could give your team crit. Your mage having crit on their auto attacks doesn't really matter. It's just not a great item. Alright guys, these are the labels that I have assigned to all of the items. Hopefully it makes it a little bit clearer. Broken items and core are the top tier. Good in every single game is the next tier. Situationally strong, things that you want to consider but probably should not be built over these other items, are in this tier, but like I said, situationally strong. Mid, I'm afraid, this basically is the same as the tier above it, except the payoff is not really worth building. And then bad, do not buy, is as self-explanatory. as it gets. Hey everybody, wanted to just add this short little clip into this video because at the time I had recorded it was pre-patch 9.10. Right now I'm just in my 9.10 patch notes review, and I just wanted to mention that a couple of the items in this video are going to be very slightly worse than I have them rated in the video. The main ones in question are just Heart Ward and Mana Core Spike, so I'm going to try to find the changes here. I would say, generally speaking, just basic rule of thumb, I'd rate both of these items about 1 tier higher than I have them in this video, but nothing is too crazy. You know, the Heart Ward change is pretty significant, but you still buy it in the same spots, right? You're not going to suddenly buy Heart Ward against, you know, double Hunter comps, for example. And very similarly with Mana Core Spike, if a character is still really good with the item, you're still going to want to buy it. The biggest thing here, as I mentioned in this video, is that you won't buy it first item. So I would value something like a Mail of Renewal. I would consider to be one of the best, if not the best support items in the game to go first. But Mana Core Spike is still totally fine if you're playing characters like Kabrakan that utilize the item very well, maybe Terra. You're still going to want to value Mana Core Spike. Just keep in mind that other build options may be open. It's still a very, very strong item, and as I go over in this patch notes video, it's just that you don't go at first item as often. If you guys are interested in that specific criteria or when I think you should or should not build it first, you can go ahead and check out this patch notes review. The link to that will be in the description. Other than that, as you're listening to the rest of this item tier list, just keep in mind that Mana Core Spike and Heart Ward are just very, very slightly different. Heart Ward a little bit more highly rated, Mana Core Spike a little bit more lowly rated, but they are still meta-defining items in the case of Mana Core Spike and Earrings. Earrings, I would say you can pretty much completely ignore the nerf. 100 gold doesn't really matter at all for when you build it, and the item is still very strong. Height of the Nemean is the only other one that changed, and again, I don't really think it matters. So everything on the tier list is still pretty accurate. It's still pretty representative of how I feel about items as a whole. Of course, as metas develop and change, things might be different, but for the most part, everything should still be good. All right, and finally, the last portion of this super long video is Glyphs, and to me, something I want to, well, I guess first, you know, just what we're looking at is just all the items that have glyphs that we considered. So Bancroft's Deathbringer not in here. In my opinion, you should never really build them as support. So it's just these other, 6 items, and each of their glyphs correspond to those items. I place the items where I had them in the tier list before, same order left to right for the B tier ones in terms of how strong I think the item is, and likewise just in the correct tier. I'm going to start off not in order of down here. I'm just going to start off in order of like the tiers themselves, so I can kind of explain further why these items are where they were in my original ranking. In my opinion, similarly to relics, I think glyphs are in a spot where they're at least strong enough where I personally like to at least consider or plan around having one of them in my build. I think it's a little bit harder to do that on the current patch with Mana Core Spike in the game and things like that, because your build curve is a little bit different. In the past, I felt like it was pretty easy to just go Thebes and then kind of like choose like, oh, what breastplate glyph do I want? What Heart Ward glyph do I want? You know, that type of thing. I feel like because you have Mana Core Spike and because you have these other early game items that are so strong, as well as some better, more potent damage items as a result of the build curves that the earring builds allow you to do, that I find myself getting things like Spirit Robe later than I otherwise would have. Find myself get things like Pride Wind later than I otherwise would have. So glyphs don't come up as often to me, but in my opinion, the most effective your build can be is to have some glyphed item in there and to try to utilize it to the best of your ability. It's just another passive, another effect that can increase how much you're able to contribute in a team fight. So we'll start off with Rod of Tahuti. I will put the Calamitous Rod worse than the original Rod of Tahuti, actually. I think that it is actually a complete waste of 600 gold, just because the damage is like okay on it. If I recall correctly, it scales off your power and you won't have that much. Like, I'd rather spend that gold to have like a 500 potion, a power pot, just for the CDR from it if I'm not CDR capped. Generally, I just wouldn't build Rod of Tahuti ever, so this doesn't really matter. Perfected Rod of Tahuti is actually okay and is an improvement on the normal rod. If you don't know what it does, it basically, because I've seen nobody build it, essentially all it does is you hit somebody with an ability. So let's say I'm playing Fafnir, and I'm in dragon form. I hit them with 1 stun, it puts a mark on their, like, over their head, only 1 target at a time. I hit them with my other stun, now it consumes the mark, I think it gives me movement speed, and then it also reduces all of my cooldowns by 1.5 seconds, and that can only happen every 8 seconds. Your Fafnir cooldowns are longer than 8 seconds, you know? So pretty much if you're in dragon form, you just have a 1.5 seconds off all your cooldowns if you're using stun, stun, wait, stun, stun, wait, so on and so forth. So rare interactions like that can be really cool, but it's 3,600 gold to get that effect. It's not realistic. There's better things you can be doing. You could build Flat Pen, you could build E-Staff, Soul Reaver, anything, and I think it'd be better. We'll move on to Jotuns. The Jotun's Glyphs, okay, this I believe is, I forget the names of the Jotun's one. This is the lifesteal and movement speed at a certain threshold. It's still an improvement on Jotuns. I think if you go Jotuns, you could kind of use this, but I wouldn't really buy this one. I don't think it fits the style of characters that you're going to really be playing. Lifesteal probably isn't going to be worth that much to you because you're not going to have that much power. Like, yes, this is a full damage item, but lifesteal tends to get better and better the more damage you build, because if you hit for 100 and you have 30% lifesteal, that's 30 health. But if you hit for 500, 150 health, that's a pretty chunky burst heal, It's just different. It's okay. The movement speed effect of it is pretty good, but I'd rather have, I think this is called Jotun's Cunning. This one's actually pretty good. It essentially just gives you more cooldowns, kind of similar to Perfected Rod. I think it works slightly differently. It's like every 2 abilities you cast, if you use like a third, or like every 2 abilities you cast reduces the cooldown of your abilities, something like that. Basically, you just get more abilities. It's all right. It's not crazy, but it's fine. Again, I wouldn't really be in a spot where I feel like I'm building either of these items. Generally, I'm only building items mainly S and A tier, and then B tier situationally is kind of how most builds kind of play out. I'll do Breastplate now. One of them's Dominance, one is Vigilance. I think this one's Dominance, this one's Vigilance. I don't know the names again. I'm just going to refer to them by what they do. This Breastplate Glyph is the stacking one. It gives you protections, and then when you reach, I believe it is 4 stacks of each magical prots and physical prots, you get prots based on the type of ability that you get hit by. So the stacks are permanent until the effect is consumed. So if I get hit with 3 physical abilities and 2 magic abilities, I could get hit by 2 more magical abilities and still not get the proc until I get hit by the physical one. So basically, until you get both full stacked, you just have more protections. It's just giving you a stack of protections. I believe it's 5 protections per stack. So it'll give me, if I have 3 stacks of each, it's an extra 15 of each procs on my breastplate. That's pretty nice just walking around. You're a little bit tankier. And then when you ever do get the proc, it gives you that effect and movement speed for a short period of time. Pretty good, makes you pretty tanky. The downside to it is I feel like it's not really an effect that you always have full control over, so that doesn't always feel the greatest to me. I'd say it still is an improvement on Breastplate, of course. It's just more stats, so why not? You could end up spending 600 gold and you get 20 of each prots. That's pretty efficient. I prefer the Aura one, especially as support. Basically, the Aura is kind of similar to Pride when after you're finished casting your ultimate, you have an aura around you where enemy gods do 15% less damage to your teammates like in that aura. So that is actually pretty powerful if you think about it against characters like a Bakasura or something like that, where they're very auto attack heavy. Being able to cast, say, a Geb ultimate or a Sylvanas ultimate or something like that to peel them and then also reduce their auto attack damage. I really like going the combination of this Breastplate Glyph plus Horrific. So let's say I'm against a double Hunter comp specifically. That is one of those scenarios where I will build Breastplate over building Pridewin, and the reason for it is because I will go this glyph against the double Hunter comp because I'll just be reducing their auto attack damage. So it's the small nuances of that sort of thing that make these B tier items stronger than the items in S and A tier. So that's the main situation I'm looking for, is either a double Hunter comp or maybe just a very strong late game ADC, maybe something like a Jingwei or something like Chernobog, something like that, in combination with any auto attack jungler, Mercury, Nemesis, Baka, Kali, anything like that. I will consider building this glyph. I think it's very, very powerful. I treat it very similarly to how I would treat a relic upgrade, where as soon as I feel like I have a good back and I'm able to buy it, I'm just snap locking it, and I think it's really powerful. Actually, I'll put it ahead. I think it's really good. I actually think it would move Breastplate up to A tier for me. In that situation, it would leapfrog Pridewind. So this is like the first glyph that's like so powerful where I'm like, yes, like this is sick. And I'd actually put this ahead of base. I'd put it ahead of Heartward. No, put it ahead of Exy. Moving on, Executioner. This is Ferocious Executioner. Just increases your damage. For every auto attack that you hit, you gain a stacking damage increase buff. This is more of a consistent DPS item for high attack speed characters. That's not really a situation you should be in for support. I'm going to go ahead and say this is actually... It's not like... Obviously, it's better than normal Exy, you know, you're just making it better. It's not great. Like, I wouldn't build it. I think it's kind of defeating the purpose of the true power of Executioner, which in my opinion is Heavy Executioner, which I will put all the way up here. Again, situationally, on the type of character that you can build it on, like the attack speed cap, you don't care about that at all. You're not normally going to have 2 attack speed, like, as your value, you know, you're normally going to have barely any, like, just default base attack speed. So just having Execution, that's pretty much the only attack speed that's going to be in your build. Most times, maybe you have like a Shogun's or something like that. But going Heavy Executioner is actually really nice on characters that can weave in those auto attacks as a physical support. If you're playing something like an Amaterasu, like a Fenrir, maybe even a Gilgamesh or something like that, getting 2 auto attacks on somebody is really not that difficult. And it is a ton of prot shred. It helps with objectives a ton. Really, really powerful. I'm actually going to move it up to A tier, and I really like this Breastplate Glyph a lot as well. I'd rather, like, I think these are all very, very solid options. Really, really powerful. Just really, really good. Moving on to Heartward, this is the silence effect, so it's kind of like an in-hand single target style effect where you get an auto that will silence people if you are within range of abilities being casted, if that makes sense. So if I'm in the middle of a team fight, it doesn't matter if the ability is missed completely or if it hits me, it hits a teammate, whatever. If I'm around enemy abilities being casted, it'll charge up. I think you have to be around like 5 or something like that. And then you get an in-hand silence. It can be really good in some counter scenarios. For example, you can auto attack while Khepri abducted. So if you build the Silence Heartward Glyph and a Khepri tries to pluck you, you can auto attack him, cancel out his pluck, and then kind of engage on his teammates while his CC is down. That type of thing can be really strong, but it's pretty niche in my opinion. It is a little bit better than Heartward, but I find it to be a little bit weak. I think, again, when you're building a Heartward on a Guardian, that really signals to me that you're playing more of a peel-oriented style. So a character like Yamoja, just because she does have ranged autos, can actually use this pretty well. I do feel like this glyph is underused, but I also feel like just a 1 second silent is not a ton of upside. And in comparison to the other effects that we can get from glyphs, I don't really think it's something that's super strong to me. Generally, when you're in a full team fight scenario and you're with your carries, the enemy divers are already going to be using like beads and hard committing to that scenario from your other CC. I don't think a silence is really super threatening, not to mention I think a lot of the better, more meta junglers right now are auto attackers, in which case the silence is kind of less likely to affect them. Essentially, I'm just saying I think it's really situational if you actually get value out of it, and because of that, I like to get more power from my glyph options. The other, I think this is Heartward Amulet of Stronghold or something like that, I think is the name. This is really, really powerful. I actually like this glyph a lot. I think all 3 of these glyphs in A tier are very, very valuable. The Sovereignty one is just a ton of protections, a ton of protections. It converts your physical protections into magical protections. I think at like a 15% of your physical prot become magical prots. It essentially makes Heartward by far the best single magical, like, if you only have one pure magic defense item in the game, this is the best one for sure, Heartward is, because of this glyph. The only reason I don't rate it higher and have it as like an S tier glyph is because, in my opinion, as a support, you're getting more than enough magical protections just by nature of going Compassion a lot of games. That's a starter item that gives you 0 physical prot and gives you 60 magical protections. So you're already in a spot where you're kind of magic prot heavy in your build, so I don't really build Heartward that much just due to that reason alone. I'm more looking to get more physical prot to deal with the enemy hunter, deal with the enemy assassin, that type of thing. and I don't feel like the aura on Heartward is as valuable as the aura on Sovereignty, Thebes, Lotus Crown, etc. In my opinion, it is the weakest aura item. So even though I think the Glyph is very, very strong, I think your base build without it is quite weak going Heartward. And when you go items like Mana Core Spike, these hybrid items, and I'm going to have Compassion most games anyways, I really don't like doubling down on the magic prot version of it. And it also makes the Amulet of Stronghold a little bit weaker, because if my starter item is more magic prot heavy, then I'm not really converting as much Fizz prot into magical. So while I do think it's very, very strong, I think this item is actually a better option for solo laners as a soul magic defense item. Solo laners tend to build double physical defense items back to back. They'll go like Sovereignty Glad Shield or Breastplate Glad Shield or something like that. And they tend to be very physical prot heavy characters in their role, because they're building to deal with the enemy hunter. So when that is the case and they need a lot of magic prot late game, I think going Amulet of Stronghold, if they don't have another glyph item, is really, really strong. And then finally, Magi's. These glyphs are the reason that Magi's is an S tier as a support item to me. Both of them, I think, are incredibly strong. I think Revenge is very slightly stronger. The reason I think Revenge is a little bit stronger is that I think that right now, the style of characters that will be played with Mana Core Spike and around those more damage-heavy tank builds take advantage of the Magi's Revenge glyph a little bit more. You'll end up being a lot more dive heavy on your team compositions as a result of that. So when you can hard engage and you can play a character that's very meta like Kabrakan or something like that, and you can blink engage with a Magi's Revenge, you're already going to have so much crowd control just off of your hard engage. When they try to peel you off and they proc Magi's Revenge, and you give your whole team a movement speed boost and a damage buff towards that target, it makes it really easy to chase down kills on targets that are kind of isolated. Oftentimes it'll be the enemy frontline that's proccing that Magi's on you, which means it's very easy to turn on them. It makes them a lot less tanky than they otherwise would have been. So very, very, very strong. And it also kind of gives you the opportunity to punish people for hunting your Magi's. Let's say you're around a Gold Fury, you're around a Fire Giant, they're trying really hard to take your Magi's off of you. Suddenly it can become a situation where it allows you to engage on them. On the other hand, Magi's Shelter is kind of one where it's more susceptible to not get value when somebody tries to poke it off of you, in my opinion. But on the higher upside of it, in my opinion, is it counters a lot of very, very powerful characters. So let's say they have an enemy Hunbots and they ult in a team fight. It won't be instant that the Magi Shelter pops and then goes to one of your teammates to give them your Magi's, and you get two people who get CC immunity from the Hunbots ult. It's not instant, but it's still quick enough that it could help them out if their beads are down. It could end up saving them. It makes it really tricky, not only for those AoE engages to get as much value, but also it's specifically very, very good versus single target engages. Let's say you're against something as simple as like an Athena Poseidon or something like that, an Athena Scylla, anything where it's, you know, setup, follow-up, you know, very straightforward on a single target, or like a Naja. If you're able to proc your Magi's, and now not only are you safe, but you're also giving it to a carry, it really becomes a situation where their whole engage is really messed up. And when characters that are very follow-up reliant, something like maybe a Ra, for example, that wants to snipe off of CC, when that kind of chain combo that they have, when that's disrupted, it opens up the ability for them to just miss those abilities, or for it to be really hard for them to pick a good engage. So I just think Magi's is so strong at controlling the flow of the start of a team fight, and really that's what allows you to do most of your work as a support. When you can find a good engage, when you can get a lot of value from your relics, you know, you can hit their whole team with a horrific, or you can get a big Ankh off of like a Terra ult, or you can Phantom Shelly Emoja's ult and then run at their team or something like that. When you're able to get those big engages and you're able to have these Magi's glyphs help your team play that way, I think it's just really, really powerful. I rate them both very highly. In my opinion, when I load into a game, these are the first two items that I'm really thinking about, where I'm like, okay, is this a good Shelter game? Is this a good Revenge game? If it's not, I start thinking about the ones in A tier. I'm like, okay, well, do they have a lot of auto attackers? Do I want this Breastplate Glyph? Does that mean I'm not going to go Pride Win? You know, that type of thing. That's pretty much everything on Glyphs. I would say that, again, try to plan these in your build. Try to think about, hey, are they good? It can change your build curve a lot, and don't feel bad. Don't feel like you're wasting the 600 gold. It's the exact same way that relics work. the upgrades are so powerful. Just because you don't see your stats increase does not mean that it's bad. You know, some of these do increase your stats, but it's still worth the money. It's still worth the gold. It's very powerful, and definitely consider them every single build that you get. Thank you all again so much for watching the video. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the normal YouTube stuff. Please, genuinely, if there's anything you feel I missed, if there's anything you'd like further explanation on, whatever, please put it down below. I'll do my best to respond to each one of you within the best of my ability and kind of tell you why I explained some of the things the way I did. And thank you guys so much for watching the video. Hopefully it was informative. Hopefully, you know, having all the timestamps to be able to jump around, come back to it or whatever helped you out a good bit. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.